Hey everybody, you are listening to the Soberful podcast. I'm Veronica.
And I'm Chip.
How are you doing, Chip? You doing all right?
I am doing very well. I'm doing very well. I've just had 2 holidays abroad, short week holidays, 4 days each time. One to Bologna, one to back home to my friend in Stockholm. And they've both required inordinate amounts of walking. Beautiful places to walk around, but I came home absolutely exhausted. I mean, Bologna with Heidi, and she walks a lot, and I thought, wow, I mean, we were doing like 18,000 steps a day on my
That's a lot.
pedometer. Yeah,
That's a
that's a lot.
lot.
Yes, thank you. Went to Stockholm, was doing 20,000 a day,
That's
and
a
it was
lot.
like, yeah, up towers again. Bloody hell, I've done towers this summer. Um,
The summer
so
of towers.
I'm good and probably healthy for it. But I just want to sit down by a pool somewhere and do nothing for a week. Yeah. So
I
that's
just got
but
back from
otherwise I'm good.
California,
Yeah.
Northern California. There was a reunion of my husband's college friends, and we left Alabama, which is like unbelievably hot and humid, like so hot and humid, and went to California and froze. It was freezing.
Oh,
And I
was
could
it?
never, as a British person, I just can't get in my head that California in the summer is cold.
Yeah. Is this
It's
your
like
first season of hot season in Alabama?
it's our first full summer. Yeah, we arrived last year in the beginning of August, so this is our first
Okay.
like full year. So far, I love it. I
Right.
I I don't want to be cold. I'm not good being cold. Cold doesn't work for me at all. I don't want to be cold. I'd much rather be hot. And as long
Yeah.
as you've got a pool and air conditioning, like that's what makes it bearable. But I
Yeah.
don't want to be cold ever again. I just can't. It makes me miserable. So
I don't mind the changing of the seasons. I don't mind that. What I don't like is the changing of the light. I mean,
yes,
in Sweden, it was this year. I've not been to Sweden very often in the summer, and it was light all the time. What I don't like is it's dark at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
yeah, I
That
can't.
I don't like. That
Yeah,
I
I
don't
can't.
like.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can't. That's one reason I'd never come back to England is I can't bear the winter and the lack of daylight. It
yeah,
also makes me
yeah,
miserable.
yeah,
Anyway, so we're going to be talking about today blame and how we
yeah,
blame, and how when we are in the midst of our addiction and our alcohol problem, blame is one of the processes that we get stuck in. And it's a hard one because what you were saying it earlier.
Well, I was saying, well, I'm going to want to say that it's not just something that happens. I think during active drinking, it also happens in recovery as a block to making progress. Well, I can't.
Mm,
So there isn't anybody I've ever met in my career who presents with an alcohol dependency or an addiction who doesn't have a justifiably difficult, dysfunctional childhood. There's a spectrum, of course, but
yeah.
um, I have never met anybody who has come to me, even high functioning alcoholics. We did a whole episode on that. High functioning alcoholics who um, are kind of without any kind of problem. They've had they've been sent off to boarding school at 6 or something. Every client I've ever had has had a trauma, dysfunction, a parental abandonment, lack of love, lack of affection, what we call ACEs over here, sexual trauma. Everybody has something, an element of that. That
Everyone has stuff. Everyone has stuff.
everybody
Yeah.
has stuff, and particularly people with alcohol dependency has stuff. So
Yeah.
the balance is trying to get, why did you drink? Well, I drank because of this, and this. Okay, all right, that's fine. And I understand that, and I identify with that, and I sympathize with that. But what are you going to do about it? And that's when I think people get stuck, because it means that they've got to probably confront the past. And so there's a whole lot of stuff about getting locked into blame. And I certainly know for sure. I mean, I probably will self-disclose a lot in this episode because it feels very relevant. I know that throughout all my using and drinking, I blamed that on my childhood, my sexual trauma, particularly, and my abandonment. That was my three sort of go-to places of, well, this is why do you behave like this? What's the matter with you? Why do you behave? Well, this is why I behave like this. It's because
Can I
of
ask
this.
you, was it conscious? Like, were you conscious, or like, was it a conscious thing or a subconscious thing?
I
Because
was just, I think I was conscious of the lack of, that there was a dysfunctional childhood, that because of my mad brother and everything. I think I was conscious that had been an impact. The abandonment was subconscious. I wasn't so aware that that was such a chronic thing, but that was subconscious. And I think a lot of it was subconscious, but I would definitely verbalize, so I must have been conscious, that I am I am this kind of person because I have, uh, I was, I've been badly parented and unloved in my life. That would have been a sort of shorthand. I've been unloved. Nobody's ever cared for me. That's why I behave like this. So that would be my short. So that would be conscious. The other stuff came to light in sobriety and in therapy and stuff like that. And that's when I learned about abandonment, and also was able to talk for the first time about the sexual trauma, which I'd never talked about to anybody. That was my secret. I'd never talked to anybody about it. But in my head, I guess that was conscious. I guess in my head, I did think, well, these bad things happened to me, therefore that justifies me drinking. And I think that's that word has just sprung to mind. I haven't thought about it before now, but we blame these things because it justifies our behavior. I am able to justify this very difficult behavior, which annoys everybody and is difficult for me. I'm able to justify it because of these bad things. So the trick for me, the line is, okay, that's great. I understand that completely and I get it. And I'm not going to, for a second, try and take that away from you. I get that you have got those very dysfunctional and justifiably negative reasons to feel bad about yourself, to feel shy, to feel socially anxious, to feel ill at ease in sexual relationships, to feel all those things. You're perfectly justified in doing that. But how is drinking helping doing anything other than anesthetize the discomforting feelings that those bring on you? It's not resolving it in any way at all. So there has to come a point when either you or somebody else has to say, Chip, I get that, or whoever it is, I get that. You've had a bad time, but please tell me and explain to me that other than anesthetizing your negative emotions, how is this actually resolving your fear of abandonment, your shyness, how is it actually dealing with that? How is it resolving it?
We get, so the thing is about blame is it masks a lot of things. Like,
Yep.
what we're doing is deflecting from our own shame and embarrassment about the way that we behaved. And when you were talking, I was thinking, I don't think for a lot of us it's conscious. Like, I don't think that we're consciously, I think what happens is we form, because of our circumstances, that we then form belief systems, right? Mine were, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, similar to yours. And that becomes the reason that things never work out for me. And so you get kind of stuck in that. And what happens is you feel powerless. But blame is about letting go of your power. What you're saying is, it's not my fault because blah, 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 blah. Now,
Yeah.
I know I did it consciously, like where blame worked a lot is like, I've had the worst week at work. Like my boss is an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And if you like, and to hell with it, that's why I am going to have a drink on a Friday night. So
Yeah.
I know that I did that consciously, like, a lot. I knew I shouldn't use cocaine, but I would go out and my friend would have it, and we just happened to be like, if she hadn't have had it, I wouldn't have done it. Right? It's as simple as that. So
It
I
was
would,
her. Yeah. You
yeah,
mixed with the wrong crowd. You mixed with the wrong
yes,
crowd. Yeah.
yes. So there was a lot of blame on, well, I wasn't going to go out this week, but then it was her birthday and she insisted, and I felt really bad for her, and so I had to. Right? There was a lot of that went on that was very conscious, and you can't see it at the time. It's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. So I think that I also think the process of it. I remember having clients who have been trying to get sober for a while, and they are aware then that they have these things that have happened to them,
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
much more aware that, and it's like a yeah but this happened to me, yeah but
Yeah.
it's a really interesting, and I think it's very much part of our psychological defense, isn't it? Because
Oh,
when
completely. It
when
happens.
you blame, there's nowhere to go. Where do you
Yeah.
go with that? It's not my
Yeah.
fault, I have no power.
No, I mean, but as soon as you said that, I thought, yeah, this isn't just about sort of this. My somebody might say my wife was unfaithful. That allows me to be unfaithful because she was unfaithful or he was
Yeah,
unfaithful, so I can be
yeah,
unfaithful. Well,
yeah,
yeah, but so again, you're using blame to justify your own behavior. But I mean, I don't want to extend the topic endlessly to into things, but blaming the government for this or blaming the government for that or blaming this for that. I don't want to get in. I really want to try and focus it down into the way that blame plays into our continued drinking and our resistance to moving out of drinking into sobriety, because if you've blamed a certain behavioral trait for 20 years on something that happened to you, you're not just being asked to give up drinking, you're being asked to give up your whole modus operandi of life and how you interact with people. Because if people talk to you and they say, well, what's up, oh well, I had a terrible childhood and I did that, and I'm not for a second minimizing dysfunctional childhoods, but if you're then asked to get sober, you're asked to not only give up drinking, you're asked to give up that kind of justification for your behavior. So, well, okay, so you've stopped drinking, but you're still continuing to behave like an asshole. How are you explaining that one? Well, it's because of all that, So it can continue not just during your drinking. It can be an excuse, or you can blame your drinking on whatever it is you've chosen to choose. But then you can also continue that blame into sobriety, and I think there comes a point when you have to say, okay, yeah, I get it, but now this is your responsibility to do something about it. And I don't think she'd mind me doing this. Quite rightly, my daughter had a terrible childhood and she blamed a lot of her bad behavior on the fact that she'd had a crappy childhood, and she was quite entitled to have that thought process. And she went to therapy for it, and she'd go to therapy, she'd go, well, it's your fault, and I'd go, yeah, it is my fault, yeah, you're quite right. But there came a point about after 6 or 7 times of that process happening when I had to say, yeah, you're right, that was my fault, but it's now your responsibility to do something about that. It's now your responsibility. I can do my part by not continuing to behave like an asshole, but it's now your responsibility to go away and get that resolved within yourself. I can't do that for you. You've got to do that within yourself, and go and find the appropriate resources to help you resolve that stuff. And the same definitely applied to me. You know, I had to recognize that, uh, okay, I've got these very, very justifiable reasons for being shy and withdrawn and for being unhappy with life and feel discontented with myself as an individual. So I stop using, or I've used it as an excuse to use all my life. I stop using. Well, now I've got to become somebody. Am I going to continue being that person? Am I going to continue being that shy and withdrawal person? And to begin with, I can blame my shyness on the fact that I've, had all these things happen to me. But there comes a point when you've got to start taking responsibility for changing your behavior, because drinking, you proved quite conclusively, didn't help you resolve all those things that
Yeah.
you blamed. So what are you going to do about it? You're going to continue to go through life being miserable. And I do hear, without doubt, I hear people quite long time in recovery going, I'm not enjoying life. Well, why aren't you enjoying life? Well, because I had this terrible childhood. Well, yeah, it does sound like you did have a terrible childhood. What are you doing to work? What work are you doing on trying to resolve it? Oh, nothing. Oh, okay. So you're continuing to get locked into blame. Even though you're sober, you're continuing to get locked into blame. I might suggest to you that you go away and get some therapy, do whatever it is you have to do, learn about it, but somehow stop making this the reason for you to be unacceptable, socially unacceptable, or unhappy, or even unhappy. In that, go away and find go away and find what it is, and that's why I think people who try and get sober in isolation on their own don't
Yeah.
do very well, because they don't have the, where do you learn how to resolve your stuff without interacting with other people who've had similar experiences, and you've gone, oh my God, that's the same as me. What did they do? Oh, they did this and this. But if you're doing it in isolation and not doing it with any kind of input, it's going to take a long time for you to resolve all those things.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, and it's very hard for other people when they use blame and they use well, this happened and that happened. It's very hard for other people to go like, oh, yeah, and it kind of what's the word, disarms people.
Yeah.
And I've definitely had clients who've used their story, as a way to deflect and disarm any kind of criticism or people saying like, you need to, well, yeah, and you need to stop drinking, because it's quite effective
Yeah.
in doing that. But it's such a stuck place. And I say this a lot. This whole process of sobriety, all the stuff we do, it's not about what's fair, and it's not about justice. It's about you being okay. So we can scream that this wasn't fair, what happened to you, until the day we die. But that doesn't, if we did that, it wouldn't mean you would be okay. You would just still be in the place of not being okay, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's accept that it wasn't fair, but what are we going to do about it? And I remember when I trained to be a therapist, and we did a module on existential therapy, and the existential therapy is, at its core, it's not what happened to you, it's how you choose to respond to what happened to you.
Okay.
And when I found that, I was like, oh, that's it. That was the thing that resonated with me, is that it's not what happens to you, it's how you choose to respond to what happens to you. And that bit is always just sat, that just rings true for me.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
It wasn't fair, it wasn't okay. Justice may happen or it may not happen, but and there's a big thing about the power here as well. When you blame, you give your power away. You're saying it like, I'm powerless here, It's not my fault. I can't do anything about it because it was
Mm-hmm.
done to me by other people. And if it hadn't been done to me, let's get our time machine, go back and undo the thing that was done. Like, none of those things can happen. And then we can sort of sit comfortably in that place of like, I have no control, I have no power. This is just how it is. I've just got to drink. I just got to
Yeah,
drink.
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It's such a powerless place. And I want to help people feel empowered and to take control back of their life and their narrative as well.
Yes, and changing that narrative. Yeah, because there's no doubt about it. Drink and drugs are a very, very effective way of coping badly, but nevertheless coping with childhood trauma, abandonment, whatever the issues
Yeah.
are, sexual abuse, whatever. Being able to throw a comforting blanket of alcohol and drugs over that is a very effective way of dealing with it. It comes with negative consequences. It comes with you killing yourself, and it comes with you, being very unhappy and behaving very badly. But certainly to begin with, it's a very effective way of throwing a blanket over that. And also, when confronted, especially in the early stages of drinking, being able to say, well, because this and this happened, this is why I drink. And, again, I feel the need to really emphasize this is absolutely not saying people should not blame the reasons that they are unhappy and dysfunctional as an adult. I think you are quite entitled to blame poor parenting, abuse that might have happened to you, abandonment that might have happened to you, childhood, adult childhood experience, all these things. You're quite entitled to blame those things because they should not have happened to you,
Yeah.
and they should not have happened to you, and they've damaged you, and you are extremely, broken as a result of those things, and you're entitled to feel that way. But I don't think what you are, I think you have to somewhere draw the line and say, am I going to just go through life constantly blaming this, or am I going to try and resolve this? And I think when people make the shift into sobriety, having to also shift the reason that they are the way they are is a much more difficult change to make. It's easy to by the time you've got to the end of your drinking career, it's easy to see, I've got myself into a mess with alcohol, I need to stop drinking. That's quite I don't want to be glib, but that's quite an easy choice to make. It's quite obvious. But then you then have to face, okay, the person that's now stopped drinking is somebody who's blamed his past, justifiably, who's blamed his past for years and years and years. Now that you're not drinking, are you going to continue to be violent? Are you going to continue to be whatever
Steal, lie,
whatever. Are you going to
manipulate.
be, it could be those things. It could be something as benign as shyness. Are you going to continue to be chronically shy because of those things? Are you going to continue to do all sorts of behavior? Or are you going to go, and I think it's one of the things actually that puts people off getting sober, is that this has been their kind of raison d'etre for all their life. And suddenly the drinking bit, which is in some ways the easiest bit, getting rid of that, although people don't think it is, but it is probably the easiest bit. You suddenly then get sober and you're living your life sober, but you're still behaving badly in relationships. You're still very, very angry. You're still, really rude to people, or you're still cut off from things, whatever it is. Well, why are you like that? Well, it's because of this. Well, now that you're sober, there's a bit of a responsibility to change some of that. And I think that is difficult for people because it's much more existential, as you say. It's much deeper, it's much more subconscious, and it's much it's something that really it takes time. I mean, how long did it take me to really understand my fear of abandonment and the reasons for my abandonment and how it impacted me and how it affected my relationships and how it affected my behavior in relationships? That probably took 4 years in sobriety before I really got my head around that one. And now I'm able to, I hope, understand it quite clearly. And it doesn't, I'm not sort of saying, well, there's no point in having a relationship with me because I'm terrified of abandonment because such and such happened. Well, kind of go and do some work on it. And so I think it's a huge subject, actually. Now that the more I sort of start talking about it, I think it's an absolutely huge subject. I don't know anybody who comes to sit in front of me and says, I've got a drink problem because I just like drinking. And that's the end of it. They come to me and they say, I've got a drink problem because such and such happened, because these happened. And I go, yeah, that sounds like pretty crappy kind of experience to have had in life. I hope I'm not as glib as that, but that sounds incredibly difficult, incredibly dysfunctional.
I just want to point out, as therapists, that the first thing we do is really validate people's experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the first step, is really validating that did happen. Because I also find with clients, I've had clients before where they'll kind of tell me the story, they'll brush over it, like, oh yeah, and then this, and I'm like, well, hang on a minute, like,
yeah,
whoa, that's huge. So
yeah,
the first thing to do is really validate people's pain, experience, and reality, and really validate it. And that mattered, and you matter, and that was a big thing, and that really hurt. That's the first part of the process. And then it's like, well, what are you going to do about that?
exactly.
Because the other thing is, it's all about when you stay in blame, you give your power away. You just give your power away. And when we were younger, when we were children, we didn't have choices, we didn't have resources, and we didn't have any power. We just had to go and do what our parents or community expected of us. And what happens is, as adults, we're giving that away, because as adults, we have a degree of resources, choices, and power. There is things that we can do. As an adult, if I want to get on a train and go somewhere, I can get on a train and go somewhere. My kids can't do that.
No.
Right. So it's about letting go of blame is about reclaiming yourself and reclaiming your power, that we're validating and acknowledging the past and things that happened. And now you now have choices and resources. Because the other thing is, and this is a classic in therapy, is what we're doing is we're continuing the harm to ourselves, aren't we? We're the ones.
Yeah.
Like, this happened in the past, but we're continuing. I mean, you continued the harm to you. I continued the harm to myself. And we create these crazy stories and justifications and rationalizations in our brain that it's being done to us, and we have it's just not fair.
Yeah. And as you were talking just then, I was thinking of, an intervention whereby, you will hear somebody say, okay, well, I had this in this childhood, this and just this, such and such happened to me. But, they did the best they could. And they love me really. And no. And you go, oh, okay, you just talked about something. Is that how you're going to bring your children up? And they go, oh, no way,
No.
not in a million years. No way. I go, well, I thought you said it was all right. I thought you said it was, they did the best they could. Well, no, they could have done a lot better. Yeah, they could have done a lot better than that. And I think, again, it's almost a generational thing as well. Well, he behaved like that because he went through the war. He behaved like that because he did this or that, or she behaved like that because that happened to her. And we get kind of, we can label people. We label ourselves, as somebody. and it's so difficult to talk about this because I feel quite justified in talking about somebody who's had trauma, dysfunction, abandonment. I've had most of the things that occur to people in my life, so I feel okay talking about this. But you do get people who come into rehab, for instance, and they've got a label on their forehead, a bit like that game, but it's called, I'm a trauma victim. Okay, you're also an alcoholic and you're also a drug addict, but you're a trauma victim. So let's deal with the primary problem first, which is the alcohol or drugs. Now what have we got? We got trauma victim. Okay, well, let's do this. Oh, I can't do that. I'm a trauma victim. Or I can't do this because I'm a trauma victim. I can't do that. I'm a trauma victim. And obviously dealing with trauma is very difficult, very, very difficult, and takes care, and it should be done carefully and over time. But you can't keep on well, you can, it's your choice. You can do that. Of course you can. You can be whoever you want to be for the rest of your life. But if you want to kind of be a better version of yourself, or a more competent version of yourself, or somebody who's got better, as you said, control over their life and over their emotions, you're going to have to do some work. You can't keep on pushing people away because of what your past has been like. I can't deal with this. You don't understand me. Well, I don't understand you because you actually haven't told me anything. You haven't actually told me what it is that's happened to you. So I can't know. I'm just going to continue to be angry and blame, and I'll blame you, and I'll blame you, and blame. And obviously I can understand now all the sort of psychological things that are going on within somebody like that. But it's such a fine line between justifiable blame, and then continuing to use that experience and blame it on subsequently unhelpful, unkind, difficult behavior. It's a fine line, but I think you have a choice when you get sober of continuing to use those past experiences as ways of staying unhappy, unwell, discontented, or you can choose to go, I've blamed all these things and I'm quite justified in blaming those things, but how do I resolve them? Not resolve them. Some things can't be resolved. But
how we can all get to a place of acceptance?
Yes, exactly.
It's acceptance that, yes. And again, I've heard so many things like, I wish this never should have happened to you, and we should have a world where this stuff doesn't happen to children, especially. Yet it does. Yeah. And we don't have time machines. We can't go back. All we can do, like you've done, is how do I want my life to be going forward? Because the other thing is that kid who was abused and all the things that happened that were unfair, that weren't right, that kid really deserves a better future, not the one that you're giving it right now.
Yeah.
That kid really deserves some peace and acceptance and love and connection and all of those kind of things. And it's a real mindset shift, this. And blame is it's really powerful, and it's really seductive, because when you blame, it feels right. There's a righteousness in it, yes. Right? That feels very like the righteousness is fuel. We really like how we feel, and it's really effective in stopping a lot of people challenging your behavior or saying, or any of that stuff. But ultimately, it doesn't lead to you being okay. And the goal here is that you end up okay. That's what's important, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And as you were talking there, I was thinking, there are people who have got justifiable blame for some of the things that have happened. I have been very fortunate in that, not through wealth or at all, because I didn't have the money to pay for rehab, and I didn't have to pay for rehab. And I didn't have to pay for a lot of therapy until I was 5 years sober. I couldn't pay for it either. I haven't bought my health, if you like, or my well-being, whatever flimsy grip I might have on health and well-being. I haven't bought that. It's because I've worked at it. But there are an awful lot of people who, because of the way the world is nowadays, are denied the opportunity to do the work necessary to move on from blaming to a place of acceptance, because everything has been monetized. Everything has been. Here am I blaming the system? I am blaming the healthcare system for monetizing everything. And if you want to get good help, you have to bloody pay for it now. I didn't have to pay for rehab. It was picked up by the healthcare people. You can't get into a rehab now unless you've got, over this country, £3,000. Well, that denies access to help for a lot of people. In prison, I hear people in prison who've had not dissimilar stories to me, but do they have access? Are they able to access the resources to enable them to move on? And that's when people, unfortunately, even though they really want to get out of being that way, do get stuck in blame because they haven't got the ability to access resources to help them get out. I'm very fortunate in that I was able to access resources to get me out of that, because there was free support groups, free rehab, free aftercare therapy after that, incredible resources that enabled me to help me resolve the things that I'd blamed all my using on. And I think it's really, I'm very unhappy and passionate about trying to allow people who cannot financially access that stuff be able to do that. And as you know, you worked in a rehab with me that we provided free places to people, because it's important. You've got to have, in order to be able to do that work we've been talking about, of moving from blame to acceptance, most of us need help doing that. And that help, unfortunately, can come at quite a cost nowadays. So I think, but I think people who are listening to this, who identify that they have retained a whole lot of blame, there are resources that you can use nowadays that to try and get you to move out of that into a place of acceptance, because it's not an easy fix. I mean, the easy bit, as I said earlier on, is stopping drinking. That's quite a quick thing. That's a couple of weeks with the right resources. That's trying to change somebody you've been for maybe 30. I mean, for me, 37 years. Most people present in the mid sort of 30s to 40s. Trying to change a lifetime of blaming people, blaming circumstances, trying to change that into a healthier, less destructive thing to you requires help and assistance. And I'm afraid it's not as available as it should be.
Yeah, and I mean that's part of the blame, is about the resources and the help. But I only agree with you part of the way. I think it's complicated. I mean, I was the same. I got sober in AA. That's all there was back then. I didn't have any resources. It's $1 a meeting, and that was literally.
Yeah.
But I was extremely motivated because I was desperate. And the motivation bit, I mean, I've had tons of clients in treatment that other people are paying for, either family or friends or the state, who just couldn't give it, like they're just there for a bit. The motivation isn't there. So
No.
there is something about when we value what we pay for. So there is something about that. Now, I believe wherever you are, well, here's the thing, AA is everywhere.
Yeah.
So everybody can get to, maybe there's transport, but, there's charities, there's churches. If the motivation is there, I've seen people take a bus 2 hours to a meeting because they were desperate and they wanted this more than anything. And so I having the resources to get, I've also seen lots of people where they just throw money at the problem and they remain passive. It's like, I'm giving you all this money, fix me. Well, I don't want to actually have to do anything. So there's that bit is it really depends on the many factors and the motivation of people. But I would like everybody who really wants to get help for that help to be available to them. But there is definitely something about, we value what we pay for, the energy of that exchange. I mean, I know I was the same when I paid for my therapy and that kind of stuff, and I've done a lot of it. I was like, I made every second count, and I highly valued it. Like, I am paying for this, and I'm getting everything I can. And I've always been like that. I've paid for coaching and all kinds of stuff, and I show up and I do the work because that is, you know. So anyway, just to wrap it up about blame, it's part of a process. And if we get seduced into getting stuck in it, and people enable us to get stuck in it as well. People are just like, they enable it, right?
Yep.
And justify the, you know, like, but it's a stuck place. You can't, nothing good, nothing is going to, you might be right. You're right. None of these things should have ever happened. Nobody should have ever, especially as children, gone through anything that was hurtful or traumatic. Yet so many of us did.
Yeah.
So that it comes down to, it's not what happens to you. You take your power back by choosing your response to it.
Yes.
And that's how you get out of blame and into recovery and into emotional sobriety, right?
Yeah,
Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do. As you were talking, I was thinking, when we're drinking and using, there is a competition. Who is the worst? We don't think who is the best. We think, who is the worst? I'm worse than you. I mean, it works in reverse. I'm a better drinker than you. I'm a worse addict than you. There's a kind of peculiar competition that goes on. And that can happen with what we blame as well. Okay, well, I blame this, and this. Oh, really? Is that all? Well, I've got this, and this. I've got a lot more things to blame than you have, which makes me, I don't know, special and different. But I think blame is a huge part in why we can drink in the first place. I think it's a huge part in why we continue drinking. And I think we have to take a really, really good look at it in our sobriety, not just in relation to our drinking, but in how we live our life. Do we live our life blaming everybody and everything, or do we try and make the best of the situation that we have, albeit sometimes in a limited way? Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Love to know your thoughts on this. We've all done it. We've all been guilty of it. I know I have. I'm sure Chip has as well. It's part of a human defense mechanism. But we'd love to know your thoughts on it when this episode comes out. Please make sure you're following, like, and follow the show so you don't miss an episode. And we'll be back soon with another great episode. Thanks so much for listening, everybody.
Thank you.